Okay, these are the parts I'll be replacing today. This one here is the inner tie rod end, and then this one's the outer tie rod end. The outer one's probably easier to fix because it's just outer, so it's closer to the edge, but you can pick these up. I got mine on eBay I got a whole set of them. I got 2 of these and 2 of these. They're only on the front wheels because it's for steering. But all 4 parts of mine cost $40, I think it was, shipped to my house. You can also get them on Amazon or at a local parts store, but they're going to be probably 50 or 60 bucks if you go local. Okay, tools you're going to want for this job are, I just have this handy little auto kit that has a socket set, both standard and metric, and a bunch of other little tools in there. You probably have cooler tools than I do. Mine are kind of cheesy. But basically all you need for this is a few sockets, some screwdrivers and things like that. And then you'll need just the jack that comes with your car, and the tool to get the lug nuts off. And then you're going to need some special tools. This is a breaker bar, and then this special bar thing that this is to get the inner tie rod ends off. And then these are some pieces. You probably only need 1 of these, but I got to get 2 because mine were a little different sizes. The one that was in there was bigger, and then the one I was putting in was smaller. But you can just rent these for free at any like AutoZone or local auto repair shop. And then of course you're going to want the new parts that I'll show you here in a second. And I think that's mostly it. Oh, one other tool that they let me borrow was this one, and that's to get the outer tie rod end off. It's kind of a wedge that you're gonna poke into it and then pry it off. And then everything else is pretty standard. You also might want like a headlamp. I use that. Some WD-40 always comes in handy. You're gonna wanna wear some grubby clothes. That's about it. Okay, one thing I just remembered, before you get too much of the weight of the car jacked up, you want to get your tool to get the lug nuts off, because it's easier to get the lug nuts off when there's some weight on the wheel, rather than, once you jack it up, it'll be up in the air, and then these lug nuts are harder to get off. So you just want to come on these and, let's try this. There we go. Just loosen each one. You don't have to twist them completely off, but at least get them nice and loose beforehand. You're going to want to do that on all of them before you jack it all the way up. Okay, as you can see, once you get this thing a little higher off the ground, then it's easy because you can just start jacking it fast like this. Round and round. And you'll start hearing some sounds. Don't freak out. It's just usually just the tire is, when it's coming off the ground, it just kind of makes some sounds. Okay, now that you have jacked it all the way up, you should be able to see that your wheel can spin a little bit. That means it's off the ground completely. So now, usually with your fingers, you can just start spinning these lug nuts off. Or if they're still a little too tight, you can use the tool and get them all the way off. Okay, I was able to spin all those off. Here they are, there are 5 of them. By the way, these are, they all look the same and they're in pretty good shape, but if you have some that are kind of, over the years, have gotten messed up, you can buy these for like $2 or $3 at a local auto store. And also, one time I pulled at a wrong angle on one of these with my tool, and it actually not only pulled the lug nut off, but it broke this piece off. You can buy those too at an auto store, and that's a pretty hard job because you got to go back behind here and replace it. But they're pretty cheap, but it's kind of a lot of work to replace those. So be careful when you're pulling off your lug nuts that your tool is straight out, like it's perpendicular and comes off clean. Okay, so this next part, you're just gonna pull the wheel off. You can just grab it, kind of shake it out. There we go. Got it to come off. And whoops. So what I've realized is it's best to kind of roll, once you get it clear of there, you can just roll this wheel around. One good practice too is I usually just put it here And then I stick it under the car right there, just in case, because if your jack gets kicked out or something, if you're doing a lot of stuff under there and you happen to have your head under there, you don't want the car falling on you, so at least the wheel will be there for the car to land on. Kind of a scary thought, but it's not likely because your jack is probably not going to get kicked out. It'd take a ton of pressure, but if you get the whole car rocking, it's possible, so just safety precaution. Okay, these are a couple tools for serious power. If you can't get some of your nuts or bolts off of your car, a lot of times they're rusted. I found the first key is you probably want to squirt some WD-40 on it and try to loosen it up. But if you still can't get it off, then you can use one of these. This is just a socket set thing, but it's super long, and sometimes they call them breaker bars, and they just give you a lot more leverage. There's also these tools that you can basically bang on this with a hammer or a mallet, and it's going to twist this thing left or right, so it just gives it some power. So you can just buy those at an auto store or like Lowe's or Home Depot, or you can buy them online too. Okay, at this point I've put my cool headlamp on. I know I look awesome in this. This is where it gets a little darker in there, and you might want to look back in the back, so it's good to have a little more light back there. Okay, so now we're gonna replace the tie rod end, which is this part, and then so that's the tie rod end or outer tie rod, and then you've got the inner tie rod, which is this piece, and it goes up inside of this this boot here. It's this rubber thing to protect it because it's got a ball joint in there, so they don't want debris going up into your ball joint. So basically that's what controls your steering for your wheel. So you sometimes the ball joint goes bad in there, or just this thing gets worn out. Okay, so first of all, you might have one of these on the bottom of this. You got to take off with needle nose pliers. You just bend these metal things out, and then you can push it through. See, as you can see there, that I got the metal pieces out, but now you just have to make them straight and then pull on it from the other side. Okay, so there's that little metal thing I just pulled out of there. Sometimes they have them on the tie rod end, sometimes they don't. But it's just a pin to make sure that this thing doesn't come off. So now there's a nut there that we need to get off. So we'll crank that off with a socket. So that socket it's a 19 millimeter in my case. Again, if you have a European or Asian car, most likely it's going to be a in metric system. See, that's a pretty tight fit. And then if it's an American car, it'll of course be standard, like in inches, like a 3/4 inch. So I'll take that off. Okay, I just broke it, got it going. Now it's coming off. Again, if it's being stubborn, then you can spray some WD-40 on it, and then use a breaker bar that has more leverage, or that other tool I showed you where you can bang on it and it'll spin the socket. Okay, I was able to get this nut off of there. So now it's all clear here. We've got our pin out and the nut. Next step is we're gonna have to pull this up out of here. Sometimes you can just bang on this with like a rubber mallet. Also, there's this tool that I was able to rent for free from AutoZone. You can get it at any parts store, just rent it for free. I mean, you have to put a deposit down, but you get it all refunded. But it's this tool that's kind of long, and it acts as a wedge, and you basically just put it in like this, and you push it in there. It's gonna ruin your old tie rod end, but it doesn't really matter because there's all this grease in there. It'll shred that rubber a little bit, but it's no big deal because you don't really care. It's an old part you're replacing. Even with this though, on the other side, I couldn't even do it, so I ended up having to get kind of innovative, and I got another jack from my other car, and just started lifting it and pushing it right into this screw till like a lot of the weight of the vehicle was on this jack, and then I just kept banging on this thing, and finally it just fell and broke through, and so they can be stubborn there, but eventually you'll get. One other thing you might want to, I forgot to mention this, but you might want to have this, like, steer your steering wheel so this is at least pointing straight or even a little to the left, because that gives you a little more space so you can see what you're working on in here. I have noticed though that it does put a little tension on these things the more you steer the steering wheel, so it's kind of nice to have it straight and not mess with it too much, because I think that contributes to why this might be hard to get out, is based on which angle your steering wheel steered or turned. So I'm here banging on this thing, banging on this part too. It's not really working with the rubber mallet like I was hoping, so I'll try the next approach. Okay, so now I've got this thing wedged in there, and I've been banging on it. And that's slowly lifting it. Okay, so I just banged on mine pretty hard. You have to get pretty aggressive with it. But when I hit it really hard with that hammer, that wedge just popped it off. You can see all the grease is falling out, because this thing was full of grease before, and I've punctured that now. So grease has popped out, but we've got this thing out of there. I usually, again, like to use my rag to clean up. A nice, clean place to work. Don't be a slob. Okay, so now you have your outer tie rod end. You're gonna notice there's a little nut there, and that's what keeps it in place. So when they do your alignment, they'll make sure that it stays and this thing doesn't move. So first you're gonna have to get that thing moved up out of the way. So just grab a wrench and twist that way. Okay, before you start undoing that, it's a good idea to just put this back into its place. Again, this thing can move around now because it's it's for your steering. So you just put that there, and then it makes it so as you crank on this thing up here, it'll hold it in place for you. So I got to think about this. Am I going left or right? Okay, yeah. So you do want to go from this perspective clockwise, because it's going to be counterclockwise the other way, so it's loosening it, and I'll just do that up a few just to get it out of the way. So that's going to make it now so our tie rod end will be able to be screwed off, so you can pull that off of there. Okay, now at this point you're going to take the tie rod end off. You got to keep track of how many times you spin it around. You have to keep track of how many times you spin it around, because that's going to keep your alignment somewhat there. After you do this, you're going to want to go in and have the professionals do alignment. I got a Groupon for like 40 bucks to get an alignment, so this at least keeps it safe. So if you keep track of this, it'll mostly be aligned, but they can get it more precise. So basically you're just going to start rotating this. So that's 1, 2, and as you can see up here near the boot, that part's not rotating as you spin anymore because you've loosened that nut there. So I'm at 2, 3, 4, 14, 15, and mine came off. So usually it's about 15 or 20, somewhere in there. My other side was at 20. So you just got to remember that number, because when you put it back on, you're gonna again want to screw it about the same number of times. Okay, as you can see, I'm cleaning mine off a little here. You're gonna want to start twisting this thing. Let's see, I want to go this way. You're gonna want to get that nut off of there, because eventually we're gonna pull that whole sleeve, that whole boot there, that's protecting the ball joint. That's gonna come all the way down this rod. So untwist this thing completely off. And that's gonna probably just go with the old one. You can throw it away, because the new, your new tie rod, inner tie rod, has that already on it. One thing you're gonna notice too is this, because these are old tie rods, inner tie rods, look how flexible that is. That's not what you want. It's very loose. Conversely, this is the new one,
and I can't even move it. It's like solid in there, you know. It doesn't rotate at all, so it's a lot stiffer. So that's a good one.
And this is bad, so that's why we're replacing it. Okay, again, you're gonna wanna clean this up a little bit. It's pretty greasy in there, especially on that, around that boot. You know, it's got, if it's a bad boot, it's probably leaked a lot of grease everywhere. And you'll notice there, there's a little metal clamp that's holding this boot on, and you just have to squeeze it with some needle nose pliers. Ouch. Okay, so I squoze it, and I'm pulling it off. See, you can see that thing, how it works. And I've let it off, and there it goes. So now we have the CV boot, or not CV, sorry, the boot, or this rubber thing, and it doesn't have the metal clamp on the front anymore. See, I'm trying to show you in there. See, there's like little metal things on either side, and you're gonna wanna squeeze one side with one of your needle nose pliers and the other one with the other side of your needle nose pliers. Okay, now you're gonna wanna like kind of get some WD-40 down in here. So you could get with a screwdriver and lift this up, and then you just squirt inside there with WD-40. And that'll just make it so it'll slide off a little easier. Okay, so I kind of squirt in there. It's actually not that important to do that, but in my case, because there's so much grease in here, it just slips off anyway. Sometimes that'll be tight on there. Next step is you got to go take another metal ring off the back that's very similar. You can feel your way back around there, around the back of this rubber thing, and you'll find there's kind of an opening in the metal thing. You're gonna have to stick your screwdriver into that hole and twist, and that'll pop the metal thing off. I don't know if you can see this, but basically I'm working my way back in there. There's that metal ring in there. I'm just kind of rotating the screwdriver around. Okay, I popped off the back of it. So now you should be able to slide this rubber boot up. I also found you really want to get this as clean as you can, because this boot's gonna have to slide along it. On the other one, I had to kind of open it up with a screwdriver to get it. There's like a ridge right here on the tie rod end, the inner tie rod end. So you're gonna have to get over that bump. So I use a screwdriver and kind of open this up and then spun it around so it could go over the ridge, and then it came off. Okay, so I got it over that ridge that was blocking it, and so now you can see the rubber boot goes all the way off. And see, this thing is nasty. It's leaking all this grease. I usually go inside and clean this up with some soapy water, get it nice and clean. And you can see here, this inner tie rod end is just totally shot. Like that ball bearing is just gone. Okay, so I got that boot all cleaned up. One thing you're gonna wanna remember is when you take that through the house, it's usually dripping like oil, so make sure you don't drip it all over your floor. My wife got kind of mad at me when I did that. And then also you want to check it for like cracks or anything. Usually these things hold up pretty well. Sometimes they get cracks, which is bad news, because then dirt gets up inside there. And that's often what ruins stuff in there, like your ball bearing in here shouldn't have any dirt. And mine is kind of dingy and dirty, so it's probably got it in there. Okay, this next part is probably going to require you to use some tools that you don't have already. First of all, this is the inner tie rod end that we're replacing. These are some parts that are going to help you to get the old inner tie rod end off and then put the new one on. So, and the reason I have two of them is the old one is bigger, so this goes on that old joint. It's going to go on there, and then I'm going to put the bar on, and then the breaker bar on there. And to show you how that's done, how that looks. So this is, let's say this is the inner tie rod end that you have in there. This is going to go like that. And then this goes up on here.
and then your breaker bar is going to go into the end there, and you're going to twist that whole thing, and it's going to twist it off so that you can get this piece out of there and put the new one in.
Okay, as you can see here, I've got that part up on there. Now I'm gonna put this on here,
and then I'm gonna get my breaker bar hooked into there, and I'm gonna twist it to the left, counterclockwise. Okay, I was able to loosen that up, so now I can start twisting that and get it off all the way.
Okay, I got it loose enough that now I can just kind of twist on this thing. I can just now twist this thing off. It's loose enough. It's okay. Now you can see I got it out of there,
and this is how it looks. So pull that out, and there's my old inner tie rod end. It came right out. Here's that metal ring that was around the rubber boot thing. So you can see I kind of mangled mine a little bit, but you can reuse these things. You can just use zip ties if you want. But you know, generally it's better to have metal, so I try to just reuse the one that's in there. I'll bend this back into shape and then just kind of clamp it, put it on the, when I put the boot on, I'll put it back on there and then just clamp it on that ridge there.
Okay, so that's as far in as we're gonna go. Now it's just replacing parts and backing out everything that we already did, like in reverse. So first of all, this is gonna go back. This is our new tie rod, inner tie rod end, and we're just gonna start putting that back on. Twist it onto that thing there. Once it gets tight, then we're gonna start using that tool to crank it all the way down. Again, this is easier now because our inner tie rod end is more stiff, so it's not as wobbly to deal with. But as you can see, I put that tool on at the end, and it's simpler now too because, that one's tighter because it's the smaller one. In my case, for some reason, my old inner tie rod ends were bigger, and so they required the bigger tool, but this is the smaller one now. Okay, so I've cranked that on pretty tight. You can keep trying it. It keeps falling off when I do it. You have to be really careful, like as you crank it on there, that it doesn't. Okay, now it's time to put our boot, or this rubber thing back on. And I've found that it's better to put these back on, these rings. Put them on both ends first before you go on there. And then you can just kind of tighten it once you get it on there, but it's a lot easier to work with it here before you put it on. Actually, I realized, so you want to put this back one on first and just put it on the loosest setting, and then you can tighten it up once you get it back there. This front one, you're not going to be able to put the ring on until it's on there already, which ends up being kind of hard, but it cinches this thing too tight that it can't really move down the shaft. So first you're going to want to take this nut off that came with the inner tie rod end, and then you just put this boot all the way over that and just push it all the way back. And you're going to want to get it to the end and then make sure that that back thing is around where it should be, and then tighten it up on that metal thing. So you could get that metal ring in the back a little tighter if you just play with it for a bit onto a tighter setting. Should be okay though, as long as it gets around the ridge of that cylinder in the back, it's usually okay. Because there's not that much pressure on this rubber thing. Now you're going to want to put this ring on, and then again squeeze it with your needle nose pliers, and then clamp it around this part. So now I've got that ring on there. Also, I forgot to mention, there's kind of a ridge here where you want it to land in, so you can get a feel for where that is. Okay, so now you can kind of bang this and get it to where you want it. You're going to take your outer tie rod end, and again, remember, in my case I went 15 turns, so I'm going to start turning it clockwise 15 times. There was one. Whoops. I want to make sure you get it started right. 1. Anyway, you get the idea, and I'll do it 15 times. Okay, so now you can get this and kind of bang it where you want it. Get it over there so you can get to it. You're going to want to take that nut that originally came with it and spin that back on there. Get it quite a ways up there. Then you're going to take your inner tie rod end again, or outer tie rod end, sorry, and you're going to get it started and then go the 15 times or however many you counted originally. So there was 1, 2, 3, 14, and 15. Okay, then we're going to want to tighten this thing up again. And you can move it over here. All these parts should move now. You can put it in there again so that you can get it tightened up. Getting this thing tightened again. Again, that's going to go counterclockwise from this perspective. Get that nice and tight on there. Okay. Now we're going to want to get this thing back down in there. You've got to play with it and jimmy it for a bit and it'll pop down in. Okay, I got it down in there. Now all we have to do is put this nut back on the bottom. And in this case, the newer one doesn't have a pin like the old one had. So this is really just my last step as far as getting the parts added on. So I'll just crank that tight now. Okay, and so now we've got those parts replaced. We've replaced the inner tie rod end and then the outer tie rod end. It's all tight here. Now we just need to put our wheel back on and take our jack out and we will be good to go. Okay, we're gonna put our wheel on now. Let me grab that. There it is. And again, I like to kind of roll it over there. It makes it easier. And then one trick is you want to make sure the bottom gets all the way scooted up to it where it should go. If that's at an angle, then the lug nuts won't line up with where they're supposed to go. And then you kind of have to lift it and rotate this around until you're going to see, eventually you'll see some screws in there and you'll be able to push them through the holes. Okay, so I kind of had to lift mine up on, but as you can see, I got those screws poking out of the holes now. And I'm just holding it on with my legs. That's going to get your legs a little dirty. You don't have to do that, but it kind of helps. Then I try to get some lug nuts on there, even if just a little bit, just to get them started so it holds it on. If you have another person here too, helps, they can hold the wheel while you get these lug nuts started. Okay, then grab your lug nut tool and just start rotating those. Get them kind of tight, but not super tight. You kind of want to do each one a little tight and get all of them somewhat tight, and then go back around and get them tighter and tighter. So, and also you don't really want to go in a circle. You want to go across from each other. It makes it a little better. So, see, it kind of rotate around and get different ones. So, just to make sure it gets on smoother, like it goes on more flat instead of one side being really tight and the other one super loose. Okay, I've got these all pretty tight on there. They're not as tight as I'm gonna have them, but they're all quite tight. So now I'm gonna go and crank down the jack, because you want to get some weight on the wheel again. That makes it easier to really get the lug nuts tight. If you have some weight on them. And this, as you crank this down, it should be a lot easier than going up, because of course as you're going left, so now or you're going counterclockwise, it's going down, so it's easier because your car wants to go down, not up. So you just crank on that, and you might start to hear some sounds too as it goes down. That's okay, it's just the weight being shifted onto the wheels and the parts in there. Okay, I got the jack all out, and that should be it. Okay, now that you've got the jack out, you're going to want to tighten these lug nuts one last time. So you just put them on there.
can see mine are cranking down a little, another quarter of a turn or so each. You can just put your weight into it. Make sure each of them is pretty tight. One thing to remember is that now that you've done the tie rod, inner tie rod and outer tie rod ends, or just one of those if you only did one, you still want to go to an alignment place and have them get your alignment done. So that's going to cost you, you know, 40, 50 bucks if you get a deal on Groupon or some deal site like that. That's what I'm going to do. And they'll just make sure that it gets lined up. But we got it, with rotating the right way, it should be good enough to be safe enough to go to the store or to get it done. But you want to do it within, you know, a few days because your alignment's probably going to be a little bit off now. Okay, so that should be it. Thanks for watching. It's been great. I hope that gives you some confidence as you go to replace your inner and outer tie rod ends on an MDX or really any car. They're all pretty similar. Good luck. Thanks. See ya. And subscribe to my channel.